The morning light filtered through the massive windows of Kepler Station as Dr. Amy Collins walked down the research corridor. She carried a small container of purple alien flowers that glowed softly in the dim light. The station hummed quietly around her, filled with the sounds of peaceful work and gentle conversations between different species. Amy smiled as she approached the main laboratory where her research partner waited. Zarath stood near a long table covered with various plant samples. The elf-like being turned gracefully when she heard Amy's footsteps. Her silver hair caught the light, and her large green eyes sparkled with excitement. "Good morning, Amy," Zarath said in her musical voice. "I have been examining the soil samples from your Earth. The minerals are very different from what we find on Sylvany worlds." Amy set down her container and joined Zarath at the table. They had been working together for 6 months now, studying how plants from different worlds could help each other grow better. The research was going well, and both women enjoyed learning from each other's knowledge. "These flowers from your world are amazing," Amy said, pointing to the glowing purple blooms. "On Earth, we have nothing that creates its own light like this. If we can understand how they do it, maybe we can help Earth crops grow in darker places." Zarath nodded and touched one of the flowers gently. "My people have used these for thousands of years to light our cities during the long winter months. We call them star tears because they shine like fallen stars." The two scientists worked quietly for several hours, taking notes and running tests. Around them, Kepler Station continued its daily routine. The station was home to nearly 3,000 beings from 6 different species. Humans made up about half the population, while the rest included Zarath's people, the peaceful Sylvani, and 4 other alien races. Captain Lisa Morrison walked through the central plaza of the station, greeting the various families and workers. She passed. The plaza was designed like a small town square with shops, cafes, and even a playground where children of different species played together. Lisa felt proud every time she saw how well everyone got along. Lisa had commanded Kepler Station for 2 years now. Before that, she had served in Earth's military for 15 years, but those had been peaceful times. The station represented everything she believed in, different peoples working together to make life better for everyone. As she entered the command center, her communications officer looked up with a concerned expression. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from an unknown fleet. They're requesting immediate contact with Station Command." Lisa frowned. Kepler Station was in neutral space, far from any contested territories. They rarely had unexpected visitors, and when they did, they usually announced themselves properly through official channels. "Put them on screen," Lisa ordered. The main display activated, showing the bridge of an alien warship. The being on screen was tall and reptilian, with dark green scales and cold yellow eyes. Her uniform was clearly military, with sharp angles and weapon symbols. "I am Commander Velandra of the Hegemony 3rd Fleet," the alien said in a harsh voice. "You are operating an illegal facility in Hegemony space. You will surrender control of your station immediately or face the consequences." Lisa felt her heart rate increase but kept her voice calm and professional. "Commander, this is Captain Lisa Morrison of Kepler Station. We are operating under international treaty in neutral space. Our records show no hegemony claims to this region." Velandra's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Your human records are incorrect. This system now belongs to the hegemony. You have 1 hour to evacuate all personnel and turn over your facilities." "I need to contact Earth Command to verify this claim," Lisa replied. "We cannot simply abandon a civilian research station without proper authorization." "You will not contact anyone," Velandra snarled. "Surrender now, or we will take the station by force." Lisa felt ice form in her stomach. She could see on her tactical display that Velandra's fleet included 12 warships, all heavily armed. Kepler Station had only basic defensive shields, and a few small patrol craft for emergencies. "Commander, we have families here, including children. Surely we can work out a peaceful solution." Velandra laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Humans always believe they can talk their way out of everything. Your peaceful ways make you weak. You have 45 minutes. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Lisa immediately activated the station's emergency broadcast system. "This is Captain Morrison to all stations. We are implementing Evacuation Protocol 7. All civilians report to emergency shelters immediately. All research staff, secure your materials and prepare for possible hostile action. In the laboratory, Amy and Zareth heard the announcement and looked at each other with growing fear. Zareth had heard of the hegemony before. They were known for their aggressive expansion and brutal treatment of those who opposed them. "Amy, we must get these research samples to safety," Zareth said urgently. "If the hegemony takes the station, they will destroy everything we have worked for." Amy nodded and began carefully packing their most important discoveries. Her hands shook slightly as she worked, but she forced herself to stay focused. Around them, other researchers were doing the same thing, trying to save months or years of peaceful scientific work. 20 minutes later, Velandra's fleet opened fire without warning. The first blast struck Kepler Station's main shield generator, causing the protective barrier to flicker and weaken. Alarms began screaming throughout the station as people ran for shelter. Lisa watched helplessly as her peaceful home came under attack. She managed to send one emergency transmission toward Earth before the communication array was destroyed. The message was simple but clear. Kepler Station was under unprovoked attack by hegemony forces. In the laboratory, Amy and Zareth were thrown to the floor as another blast shook the station. Emergency lights flickered on as the main power failed. Amy could hear the sounds of hull breaches and explosive decompression from other sections. "We have to get to the evacuation pods," Amy shouted over the noise. As they ran through the corridors, they encountered a group of hegemony soldiers who had boarded the station. The soldiers were firing their weapons at anyone they saw, making no distinction between military personnel and innocent civilians. Amy saw a small child from one of the alien families crying in a corner. Without thinking, she ran to help, pushing the child behind a support beam just as a hegemony soldier fired at them. The energy blast struck Amy in the chest, and she fell to the ground. Zareth reached Amy's side and tried to help her, but it was too late. Amy looked up at her friend with fading eyes and whispered, "Save the research. Don't let them destroy what we built." Zareth held Amy's hand as she died, tears streaming down her face. Around them, Kepler Station continued to burn as the hegemony completed their conquest. In a few hours, the peaceful research facility would be nothing but floating debris and painful memories. But Amy's final transmission had reached Earth, and soon the entire human species would know what had happened to their people in the distant stars. The emergency signal from Kepler Station reached Earth Defense Command at exactly 1400 hours, Earth Standard Time. Admiral Kate Rodriguez was reviewing fleet deployment reports when her aide burst into her office with a pale face and shaking hands. "Admiral, we have a Priority 1 emergency transmission from Kepler Station," the young officer said, his voice barely steady. Kate looked up from her papers, immediately alert. Priority 1 meant loss of life or imminent threat to human civilians. She had been hoping never to hear those words during her command. "Put it on my screen immediately," she ordered. The message was brief, but devastating. Captain Morrison's voice came through clearly despite the static and interference from the attack. "This is Kepler Station to Earth Command. We are under unprovoked attack by hegemony forces. Repeat, we are under unprovoked attack. They gave us no warning and no chance to surrender peacefully. We have civilians, including children, aboard. This is not a military engagement. They are murdering innocent people." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Kate staring at a blank screen. She sat in silence for several long seconds, processing what she had just heard. Then her military training took over and she began moving with swift efficiency. "Get me President Grant immediately," she told her aide, "and activate the emergency response protocol. I want all fleet commanders in the Situation Room in 30 minutes. Within the hour, the highest levels of Earth's government and military were gathered in the secure bunker beneath Defense Command. President Michelle Grant sat at the head of the long table, her usually warm expression replaced by something cold and hard. "What do we know?" she asked simply. General Susan Blake, the head of strategic operations, stood to deliver her report. "Kepler Station has been completely destroyed. We estimate 3,000 civilian casualties, including approximately 400 children. The attack was carried out by a hegemony fleet under the command of someone called Velandra." "Survivors?" President Grant asked. "Unknown at this time. We have rescue ships en route, but they won't reach the area for another 18 hours. President Grant nodded slowly, her hands folded carefully on the table. Everyone in the room knew that look. It was the same expression she had worn when authorizing the mining operations that had made Earth the dominant economic power in their sector of space. "Options?" she asked. Admiral Rodriguez activated the wall display, showing star charts and fleet positions. "We can have a response force at the hegemony border within 72 hours. Our intelligence suggests they have approximately 200 combat vessels spread across their territory." "That seems like a lot of ships," said Secretary of State. Linda Hayes, the only civilian advisor present. General Blake smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Ma'am, we have over 800 active combat vessels, plus another 300 in reserve status. And that's just our regular fleet." "What do you mean by that?" President Grant asked. "The deep storage facilities, Madam President. The dreadnoughts. We built during the expansion era but never had to use. We've kept them maintained just in case." President Grant was quiet for several minutes, considering her options. Finally, she looked around the table at each person present. "I want to be very clear about something," she said in a voice that carried absolute authority. Kepler Station was not a military target. It was a research facility dedicated to peaceful cooperation between species. The people who died there were scientists, teachers, families. They were murdered while trying to build a better future for everyone. She stood up, and everyone else rose with her. "The hegemony has crossed a line that should never have been crossed. They will face the full consequences of their actions. Admiral Rodriguez, begin immediate mobilization of all fleet assets. General Blake, activate the deep storage facilities and begin bringing the dreadnoughts online." "All of them, Madam President?" General Blake asked. "All of them." As the meeting broke up, Admiral Rodriguez stayed behind to speak privately with the President. "Michelle, are you sure about this? Once we start down this path, there won't be any going back." President Grant looked out the window at the lights of the city below. "Kate, my daughter is a teacher. She works with children every day, helping them learn and grow. When I think about those families on Kepler Station, about the children who died for no reason except that some alien commander wanted to prove how tough she was, I know exactly what we have to do. The entire galaxy will see this response. It will change how every species thinks about humanity." "Good," President Grant said firmly. "Let them see what happens when you murder our people." News of the Kepler Station attack reached the general population within hours. The government released the emergency transmission, along with footage from the station's security cameras showing the unprovoked assault. The reaction was immediate and intense. Across Earth and throughout human space, the response was unlike anything seen in generations. Factory workers stayed late to increase production of military equipment. Shipyard crews volunteered for extra shifts to speed up vessel construction. Retired military personnel reported to recruitment centers, asking to return to active duty. But it was not the chaotic anger of a mob. Instead, it was the cold, focused determination of an entire species that had been pushed beyond their limit. Humans had spent decades building peaceful relationships with their alien neighbors, but they had never forgotten the lessons of their own violent history. In the shipyards orbiting Mars, work crews began the massive task of reactivating the dreadnought fleet. These ships had been built 30 years earlier when humanity first ventured into deep space and encountered potentially hostile civilizations. Each dreadnought was over 2 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. The ships had never been used in combat. Diplomatic solutions had always been found before military action became necessary. But now, as the massive vessels were towed from their storage hangars and their systems brought online, it became clear that humanity had always been prepared. For this day, Dr. Helen Parker, the Chief Weapons Development Officer, had not expected to see active duty again. She had spent the last 5 years working on theoretical projects, developing weapons systems that she hoped would never be needed. Now, as she stood in the main hangar watching the dreadnought EDS Retribution being prepared for action, she felt a mixture of pride and sadness. The Retribution was her design, incorporating every lesson learned from human military history. Its armor could withstand direct hits from the most powerful known weapons. Its shields used technology that was decades ahead of anything possessed by other species, and its main guns could deliver destruction across impossible distances. "It's beautiful and terrible at the same time," said a voice behind her. Helen turned to see Captain Maria Santos, who had just been assigned command of the Retribution. Maria was young for such a responsibility, but she had earned her position through exceptional skill and absolute dedication to protecting human interests. I designed her hoping she would never have to fire a shot in anger, Helen replied. But if someone has to use her, I'm glad it's you. Maria nodded, studying the massive ship. How long until she's ready? 72 hours. All systems are checking out perfectly. It's almost like she's been waiting for this moment. Maybe she has, Maria said quietly. Meanwhile, in a small medical facility on the outer rim of human space, Zarath was recovering from her injuries sustained during the Kepler station attack. She was one of only 47 survivors from the station, rescued by a human patrol ship that had arrived 12 hours after the attack. Zarath had seen the human response to the attack, and it both amazed and frightened her. The humans she had known were peaceful, curious, always eager to learn and share knowledge. But now she was seeing a different side of humanity, one that her people had only heard about in stories. A human doctor named Nancy Williams had been caring for Zarath since her rescue. Nancy was kind and gentle, but Zarath could see the cold anger in her eyes when she talked about what had happened to the station. Your people are preparing for war, Zarath observed during one of Nancy's visits. Nancy nodded sadly. We tried peace. We offered friendship and cooperation. The hegemony chose violence instead. I have never seen humans like this before. You seem so different now. Nancy sat down beside Zarath's bed and was quiet for a moment. We are different. When someone threatens our families, our children, our way of life, we become something else, something that knows how to fight and win. Will you really attack the entire hegemony? They started this war when they murdered innocent people. Now they'll learn why Earth has survived and thrived in a dangerous galaxy. 3 weeks after the Kepler station attack, the massive shipyard facilities around Earth had transformed into something resembling a weapons factory from humanity's ancient wars. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the EDS Retribution, watching as the final systems came online throughout the enormous vessel. The Retribution was unlike any ship that had ever sailed through space. Nearly 3 kilometers long and armed with weapons that could crack planets, it represented the peak of human military engineering. But it was not alone. Around it, 11 other dreadnoughts were being prepared for combat, each one capable of destroying entire enemy fleets. Captain, all departments report ready for departure, announced Lieutenant Commander Betty Harris, the ship's operations officer. Maria nodded and activated the ship's communication system. This is Captain Santos to all hands. Today we begin our mission to bring justice to those who murdered our people at Kepler Station. We go not as conquerors, but as the sword of justice. Every person aboard this ship represents the hopes and dreams of humanity. We will not fail them. In the engineering section of the ship, Dr. Helen Parker supervised the final testing of the Retribution's main weapons. The plasma cannons were her latest design, capable of punching through any known shield technology. The kinetic bombardment system could launch projectiles at nearly the speed of light, turning asteroids into planet-killing weapons. All systems show green across the board, reported Chief Engineer Anna Miller. The new shield generators are running at 110% efficiency. Helen smiled grimly. The shields used technology reverse-engineered from captured alien equipment, but improved with human engineering principles. No enemy weapon currently known could penetrate them at full power. Elsewhere on the ship, Zarath walked through the corridors with a mixture of amazement and growing fear. She had been assigned as a cultural advisor to help the human fleet understand hegemony tactics and weaknesses. But seeing the preparations firsthand made her realize the true scope of what humanity was planning. She stopped outside the tactical planning room and listened to the discussion inside. Admiral Rodriguez was briefing the fleet commanders on their mission objectives. The hegemony controls 47 star systems with a total population of approximately 12 billion beings, the Admiral was saying. Their military consists of roughly 200 combat vessels, supported by orbital defense platforms around their major worlds. What are our rules of engagement? Asked Captain Santos. Complete destruction of all military assets, capture of war criminals for trial, protection of civilian populations where possible. But let me be absolutely clear, this is not a limited engagement. We are going to eliminate the hegemony as a military threat permanently. Zarath felt her heart race as she heard these words. The humans were not planning a simple revenge attack. They were planning to completely destroy an entire interstellar civilization. She knocked on the door and entered the room. All conversation stopped as the human officers looked at her with expressions of polite attention. "Admiral Rodriguez, I must speak with you about what you are planning," Zareth said, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course. What concerns you? The hegemony has billions of innocent people. Surely you do not intend to harm civilians who had nothing to do with the attack on Kepler Station." Admiral Rodriguez exchanged glances with the other officers before responding. "Zareth, we are not monsters. We have no intention of harming innocent civilians. But the hegemony government and military must be completely eliminated to ensure they can never again murder peaceful researchers and families. But such a war will cause massive destruction across dozens of worlds." Captain Santos leaned forward in her chair. "Zareth, what would you have us do? Ignore the murder of 3,000 innocent people? Send a strongly worded diplomatic protest? I understand your anger, but surely there must be a more limited response." General Blake, who had joined the meeting via holographic projection from Earth, spoke in a voice like ice. "The hegemony chose to cross a line that civilized beings do not cross. They declared war on humanity when they murdered our families. Now they will face the consequences of that declaration." Zareth left the meeting feeling deeply troubled. She had come to know humans as peaceful and reasonable beings, but now she was seeing the other side of their nature. They were methodical, thorough, and absolutely determined to achieve their objectives. In another part of space, Ambassador Kyle Ara of the Silvani Collective was desperately trying to arrange a meeting between human and hegemony representatives. She had known both species for years and understood that this conflict could spiral into something that would change the entire galaxy. Her ship, the Peaceful Current, approached the outer edge of human space, where Admiral Rodriguez's fleet was gathering. The sight that greeted her was beyond anything she had imagined possible. Hundreds of human vessels filled the space around a massive supply station. The dreadnoughts formed the core of the fleet, their dark hulls bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. Around them, smaller cruisers and destroyers moved in perfect formation, like a school of predatory fish preparing to hunt. But what truly amazed Kylara was the support infrastructure. Human engineering ships were creating artificial asteroid fields for target practice. Supply vessels brought ammunition and fuel in quantities that suggested a war lasting years rather than months. Medical ships stood ready to treat casualties on a scale that few species had ever contemplated. "Request permission to speak with Admiral Rodriguez," Kyle Ara transmitted to the human fleet. "Permission granted," came the immediate reply. "Please, dock with the command vessel EDS Determination." 30 minutes later, Kyle Ara sat across from Admiral Rodriguez in the ship's conference room. The Admiral was a compact woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to see through everything they looked at. "Ambassador, I assume you're here to discuss a peaceful resolution to this conflict," Admiral Rodriguez said without preamble. "Indeed, the Silvani Collective is prepared to mediate negotiations between humanity and the hegemony. Surely this matter can be resolved without massive bloodshed." Admiral Rodriguez was quiet for several moments, studying Kilara's face. "Ambassador, I want you to understand something very clearly. 3 weeks ago, the hegemony murdered 3,000 innocent human beings, including 400 children. They did this without warning, without provocation, and without mercy. I understand the tragedy, but surely—" "No," Admiral Rodriguez interrupted. "You do not understand. You see this as a political problem that requires a diplomatic solution. We see it as a fundamental attack on everything we believe in. Those people died because they trusted in the basic decency of intelligent beings. That trust was betrayed in the most brutal way possible." Kylara tried a different approach. "Admiral, the hegemony leadership might be willing to pay compensation, to apologize publicly, even to turn over those responsible for the attack." Admiral Rodriguez stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the assembled fleet. "Ambassador, let me explain something about human nature. We are patient people. We prefer to solve problems through discussion and compromise. But when someone crosses certain lines, when they prove themselves to be a genuine threat to innocent life, we become something different. What do you become? We become the thing that monsters have nightmares about." Meanwhile, in hegemony space, Commander Velandra was beginning to realize that she might have made a serious mistake. Intelligence reports were flooding in about massive human fleet movements and the activation of previously unknown military assets. "How many ships do they have?" she asked her intelligence officer. "Current estimates suggest over 1,000. Combat vessels, including at least 12 of what appear to be super dreadnoughts." Valandra felt cold fear creeping up her spine. The hegemony intelligence services had grossly underestimated human military capabilities. They had assumed that a peaceful species would have minimal military assets. "Recommendations?" she asked her staff. "Full mobilization of all hegemony forces. Recall all vessels from patrol duties. Begin immediate fortification of our border systems." "Do we have any chance of negotiating a settlement?" Her political advisor shook his head grimly. "Our embassy on Earth reports that the human government has refused all diplomatic contact. They consider themselves to be in a state of war." Valandra stared at the tactical display showing human fleet positions. She had thought the attack on Kepler Station would be a simple demonstration of hegemony power, a way to warn other species not to challenge their territorial claims. Instead, she had awakened something that she was beginning to suspect might be far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The human fleet entered hegemony space like a storm, rolling across an open plain. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the EDS Determination, watching as her tactical display updated with information from long-range scouts. The first hegemony border system lay directly ahead, and she could see the enemy fleet positions scattered throughout the area. "All ships report ready for combat operations," announced Commander Patricia Wells, the fleet communications officer. "Very well," Admiral Rodriguez replied calmly. "Begin Operation Justice. All ships are authorized to engage enemy targets." The opening moments of the battle revealed the true extent of human military superiority. The hegemony defenders had positioned themselves around their orbital installations, confident that their superior numbers would allow them to overwhelm any attacking force. They were wrong. Captain Maria Santos watched from the bridge of the Retribution as her weapons officer targeted the largest hegemony battleship. "Main guns locked on target, Captain." "Fire." The plasma cannon discharged with a sound like thunder, sending a stream of superheated energy across space at nearly the speed of light. The hegemony battleship's shields flared and collapsed instantly, and the plasma bolt punched completely through the vessel's hull. The ship broke apart in a brilliant explosion that lit up the entire battle area. "Target destroyed, Captain," reported the weapons officer with professional calm. Around the Retribution, the other human dreadnoughts were systematically destroying the enemy fleet. Their weapons were so powerful that most hegemony ships were eliminated with single shots. Their shields were so strong that enemy weapons seemed to have no effect at all. Aboard the EDS Vengeance, Zarath watched the battle with growing horror and amazement. She had seen space combat before, but nothing like this. Human weapons technology was decades ahead of anything possessed by other known species. Human defensive systems made their ships nearly invulnerable to conventional attacks. But what truly frightened her was the methodical precision of the human assault. They were not fighting in the heat of passion or the chaos of desperation. Instead, they moved with the cold efficiency of a machine designed for destruction. "Zarath, are you all right?" asked Dr. Jennifer Cole, the ship's medical officer who had been assigned to look after her. "Your people fight like nothing I have ever seen," Zarath replied quietly. "It is as if war is a science that you have perfected." Jennifer nodded grimly. "Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We learned early that the best way to minimize casualties on your own side is to maximize damage to the enemy as quickly as possible. But this level of destruction, this complete superiority, how did you develop such advanced weapons? We hoped we would never need them. But we prepared for the possibility that someday we might encounter a species that could only understand force." The first battle lasted less than 3 hours. When it was over, the entire hegemony defensive fleet had been destroyed. Not a single human vessel had taken significant damage. The orbital defense platforms surrendered without firing a shot when they realized the futility of resistance. Admiral Rodriguez addressed the surviving hegemony personnel via open transmission. "This is Admiral Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your military forces in this system have been eliminated. You will surrender all remaining weapons and prepare for occupation by human forces. Any attempt at resistance will result in the complete destruction of your installations." The response came within minutes. "We surrender unconditionally." But the humans were just getting started. Over the next 6 weeks, the pattern repeated itself across dozens of star systems. Human fleets would arrive, systematically destroy all military opposition, accept the surrender of civilian authorities, and move on to the next target. The Hegemony High Command tried desperately to organize an effective defense, but they quickly discovered that their conventional military thinking was useless against human tactics. Humans did not fight individual battles. They fought entire campaigns designed to eliminate enemy capabilities permanently. Commander Velandra found herself commanding the last major hegemony fleet, desperately trying to defend the capital system. She had gathered every available warship, nearly 80 vessels in total, and positioned them in a defensive formation around the planet Hegemon Prime. "They're coming," reported her sensor operator as the human fleet emerged from hyperspace. Velandra stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The human force was smaller than hers, only 40 ships, but she could see the massive dreadnoughts at the center of their formation and knew that numbers would not save her. "All ships, attack formation," she ordered. "Concentrate fire on their largest vessels." The hegemony fleet charged forward, weapons blazing. Velandra watched as hundreds of energy bolts struck the human dreadnoughts, only to be absorbed harmlessly by their shields. In return, the human ships began methodically destroying her vessels one by one. "Flagship Dominator has been destroyed," reported her communications officer. "Heavy cruiser Conquest is breaking apart. Battle cruiser Victory has lost all power." Velandra realized that her fleet was being systematically eliminated without inflicting any significant damage on the enemy. Human weapons were not just more powerful. They were more accurate, with longer range and faster targeting systems. "All ships, fall back to defensive positions around the planet," she ordered desperately. But there was nowhere to run. The human fleet moved like a pack of hunters, cutting off escape routes and destroying ships that tried to flee. Within 2 hours, Velandra's fleet had been reduced to less than 20 vessels. "This is Captain Santos of the EDS Retribution," came a transmission from the human flagship. "Commander Velandra, you are ordered to surrender immediately. You will be taken into custody to face trial for war crimes." Velandra looked around her damaged bridge, seeing the fear in her crew's eyes. She had started this war believing that humans were weak and easily intimidated. Now she understood that she had challenged the most dangerous species in the galaxy. "I surrender," she transmitted back. The final battle of the war took place in orbit around Hegemon Prime. The hegemony government had refused to surrender, hoping that their planetary defense systems would be enough to stop the human fleet. They discovered that human kinetic bombardment weapons could penetrate any known defense. When the government complex was reduced to rubble by a single projectile fired from orbit, the remaining hegemony leaders finally accepted that their civilization had been completely defeated. Admiral Rodriguez received their surrender while standing on the bridge of her flagship, looking down at the defeated world below. The war had lasted only 2 months, but in that time the hegemony had been utterly destroyed as a military power. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender terms from the planetary government," reported Commander Wells. "Acceptable," Admiral Rodriguez replied. "Begin landing operations. I want all war criminals in custody within 48 hours. Zarath stood nearby, still trying to process what she had witnessed. "Admiral, your people have achieved a complete victory. The hegemony no longer exists as a threat to anyone." "That was the point," Admiral Rodriguez replied simply. "When someone murders our families, we don't just defeat them, we make sure they can never do it again." "But what happens now? You control dozens of star systems and billions of people." Admiral Rodriguez turned to look at Zarath, and for the first time in weeks, her expression softened slightly. "Now we show them what humanity is really like. We will govern fairly, protect the innocent, and help them rebuild. But they will never again possess the ability to threaten peaceful people. You will occupy their worlds permanently until we are satisfied that they have learned the difference between civilization and barbarism, however long that takes." "Commander." Velandra was brought aboard the EDS Retribution in chains, her military uniform replaced by a simple prisoner's jumpsuit. As she was escorted to the detention area, she passed Zarath in the corridor. "You," Velandra snarled, recognizing the elf from the Kepler station attack. "You helped them do this." Zarath looked at the defeated commander with a mixture of pity and disgust. I helped them understand you, but you destroyed yourself when you chose to murder innocent people. This isn't over. Other species will see what humans have done here. They will unite against you. Zarath shook her head sadly. Other species will see what happens when you attack human families, and they will make sure never to make your mistake. As Velandra was led away to await trial, Zarath realized that the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had revealed their true nature, not as conquerors or oppressors, but as protectors who would go to any length to defend the innocent. 6 months after the fall of the hegemony, Zarath stood in the rebuilt corridors of Kepler Station, watching human engineers put the finishing touches on the new research laboratories. The station was larger now, more heavily defended, but it maintained the same spirit of peaceful cooperation that had defined the original facility. Dr. Nina Walsh, who had been Amy Collins's research partner on Earth, walked up beside Zarath and followed her gaze through the transparent aluminum windows. It's almost ready, Nina said softly. The new laboratories will be able to accommodate research teams from 12 different species. Amy would have been proud, Zarath replied, thinking of her friend who had died protecting alien children during the hegemony attack. She would have been amazed at what we've learned from her research notes, Nina continued. The plant samples you two were working on have led to breakthrough discoveries in sustainable agriculture. Her death wasn't in vain. Through the station's corridors, representatives from various alien species worked alongside human personnel. The difference now was the quiet presence of human security forces, their weapons and armor serving as a reminder that peaceful cooperation was protected by strength. Admiral Rodriguez toured the station that morning, inspecting the new defensive systems that had been installed throughout the facility. The station now carried enough firepower to destroy an entire fleet, but it was disguised as standard research equipment to maintain the peaceful appearance. The memorial garden is ready for dedication, reported Captain Santos, who had been assigned as the station's military commander. All the families of the victims will be able to attend the ceremony via holographic link. Good, Admiral Rodriguez replied. It's important that people remember what we're protecting here. The memorial garden occupied the central plaza where children had once played together. Now it held 3,000 individual markers, each one representing a life lost in the hegemony attack. At the center stood a statue of Amy Collins, depicted in the moment she gave her life to save an alien child. President Michelle Grant arrived that afternoon for the dedication ceremony, accompanied by representatives from dozens of species throughout the galaxy. The ceremony was broadcast to billions of beings across known space, serving as both a memorial and a warning. We gather today to remember those who died for the simple crime of believing in peace, President Grant said, as she stood before the memorial. They were teachers, scientists, artists, children. They harmed no one and threatened nothing except ignorance and fear. She paused, looking out at the assembled crowd of humans and aliens. Their deaths taught us that peace must be protected by strength, that cooperation must be defended by those willing to fight for it, and that those who choose violence over diplomacy will face the full consequences of their actions. In the audience, Ambassador Kyle Ara of the Silvani Collective listened with deep respect. She had initially opposed the human military response to the Kepler Station attack, but the months that followed had shown her the wisdom of human methods, the former hegemony. Worlds were now governed by human military administrators, but these governors had proven to be fair and effective rulers. Crime rates had dropped dramatically. Economic conditions had improved. Most importantly, the constant fear of military aggression that had characterized hegemony rule was gone. The humans have created something unprecedented, Kilara whispered to her aide. A peace maintained by overwhelming strength, but administered with justice and compassion. On the planet that had once been called Hegemon Prime, now renamed Freedom World, the war crimes trials were finally concluding. Commander Velandra sat in the defendant's dock, listening as the human judge read her sentence. Commander Velandra, you have been found guilty of crimes against sapient beings, including the premeditated murder of civilians and the destruction of a protected research facility, Judge Sarah Mitchell announced. You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." Velandra showed no emotion as she was led away. During the trial, she had listened to testimony from survivors of the Kepler station attack, including Zarath's detailed account of the events. She had seen footage of the murdered children, the destroyed research laboratories, the families torn apart by her decision to attack without warning. For the first time in her life, Velandra understood that her actions had consequences beyond military victory or defeat. She had destroyed something precious and irreplaceable, and now she would spend the rest of her life paying for that choice. In the prison transport, she sat across from Dr. Helen Parker, who was serving as a psychological evaluator for war criminals. "Do you understand why you're being punished?" Helen asked. "You won the war," Velandra replied bitterly. "Winners always punish losers." "No," Helen said firmly. "You're being punished because you chose to murder innocent people. If you had attacked a military target, if you had followed the rules of civilized warfare, you would be a prisoner of war, not a war criminal. Your people destroyed my entire civilization. Your people started a war by murdering our families. We finished it by removing your ability to hurt anyone else. But look around you. Former hegemony worlds are prosperous and peaceful under human administration. Their people are healthier and happier than they ever were under your rule." Captain Races had no answer to that. During her trial, witness after witness had testified about the improvements in their lives since human occupation began. Better health care, better education, better protection from crime and corruption. Meanwhile, in the rebuilt Kepler station, Zarath was preparing her final report to the Sylvany Collective about human nature and capabilities. She had spent nearly a year observing humanity at war and in peace, and her conclusions would influence how her people interacted with humans for generations to come. "Humans are not naturally warlike," she wrote. "They prefer peaceful solutions to problems and genuine cooperation with other species. But when their core values are threatened, when innocent people are harmed, they become something entirely different." She paused in her writing, thinking about everything she had witnessed. Human military capabilities are far beyond what any other known species possesses. Their weapons technology, defensive systems, and tactical doctrines represent centuries of evolution in the science of warfare. But more importantly, they have the psychological discipline to use these capabilities with precision and restraint. The former hegemony worlds serve as an example of human governance principles. They rule through competent administration rather than fear. They protect the weak rather than exploiting them. They seek to build rather than simply to control. However, the galaxy should understand that human patience is not unlimited. They will tolerate disagreement, competition, even hostility. But they will not tolerate the unprovoked murder of innocents. Any species that crosses that line will face total destruction as a military power. Recommendation: the Sylvany Collective should continue to strengthen its peaceful relationship with humanity. They are the most valuable allies any species could hope for, and the most dangerous enemies any species could possibly face. Zarath finished her report and submitted it to the Collective's council. She knew that copies would be shared with diplomatic services throughout the galaxy, helping other species understand the new reality of human power. That evening, she attended a dinner party hosted by Dr. Nina Walsh in the station's main dining hall. The gathering included researchers from 8 different species, all working together on projects that would benefit everyone. "It's remarkable how quickly we've rebuilt," commented Dr. Lisa Chen, a human botanist who was continuing Amy Collins' work with the star-tier flowers. "We've done more than rebuild," replied Dr. Veltar, a reptilian scientist from the former hegemony. "Under human administration, we have access to research funding and equipment that we never had before. My people are making discoveries that would have been impossible under the old government." Zarath nodded thoughtfully. "Humans have a saying, 'The best defense is a good offense.' But I think their real strength is that they make their former enemies want to become their friends." Captain Santos, who was attending the dinner in her off-duty civilian clothes, smiled at that comment. "We learned long ago that it's easier to govern people who want to be governed. Fear only works for a short time. Genuine improvement in people's lives works forever. But you maintain the military presence to ensure compliance," observed Dr. Veltar. "We maintain the military presence to ensure protection," Santos corrected. If another species decides to attack this station, or any other peaceful facility, they'll face the same response that the hegemony did. As the evening progressed, Zarath reflected on how much had changed since that terrible day when Amy Collins died in her arms. The galaxy was a safer place now, with humanity serving as both protector and administrator for billions of beings who had been oppressed under hegemony rule. But she also understood that this peace existed only because potential aggressors knew the price of challenging it. The human fleet still patrolled the spaceways, its dreadnoughts serving as silent reminders that some lines should never be crossed. President Grant's final words at the memorial ceremony echoed in Zarath's mind. We did not seek this fight, but when they crossed the line, they learned why Earth stands unconquered among the stars. The memorial garden outside glowed softly in the artificial starlight, honoring those who had died for believing in peace. Their sacrifice had led to something greater, a new order in the galaxy where cooperation was rewarded and aggression was met with overwhelming force. As Zarath prepared for sleep that night, she realized that Amy Collins had been right about one thing: the research they had been doing together, the peaceful cooperation between species, the dream of a better future for everyone. None of it had been destroyed by the hegemony attack. Instead, it had been protected by the full force of Earth, and now it would continue for generations to come.